In March 1996, 4 young tourists vanished without a trace in the rugged wilderness near Mount Rainier, Washington. For 18 long years, their families lived with the unbearable agony of not knowing what had happened to their loved ones. Search teams, investigators, even the most seasoned mountain guides, all of them scoured the area, yet not a single clue surfaced. Until 2014, when a completely unexpected discovery changed everything we thought we knew about this case. A backpack emerged from the melting snow, and what it held would reveal a truth no one had ever considered. How could 4 people disappear so completely, with not a single piece of evidence found for nearly 2 decades? The answer would leave everyone speechless. Before we uncover this disturbing story, if you're drawn to real-life mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future cases. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know where our community is spread across the globe. Now let's go back to where it all began. Mount Rainier, towering at 14,411 feet above sea level, is the highest peak in Washington state and one of the most iconic mountains in the United States. Surrounded by thick forests, glacial valleys, and unpredictable weather, the region draws thousands of hikers, climbers, and adventurers every year. In 1996, the towns surrounding the national park, places like Ashford, Enumclaw, and Eatonville, thrived on mountain tourism. Experienced guides, family-run lodges, and small outfitter shops welcomed visitors from across the country and around the world. That spring had been unusually favorable for climbing. Weather conditions were stable, with daytime temperatures hovering around 60 degrees and nighttime lows dipping into the 20s in the higher elevations. Winds were moderate, visibility was excellent, ideal conditions for adventurers of all experience levels. It was under these circumstances that 4 young Americans set out on what would become their final known adventure. Their names were Daniel Carter, 24, from Phoenix, Arizona; Emily Turner, 22, from Austin, Texas; Michael Collins, 26, also from Austin; and Sarah Mitchell, 23, from Tacoma, Washington. Daniel was a civil engineering student at Arizona State University, known for his love of mountain photography and his careful, methodical trip planning. Friends described him as responsible and experienced, with over 3 years of recreational climbing under his belt. He had summited several smaller peaks in the Rockies, documenting each journey with detailed photos and journal entries. Emily, a medical student at the University of Texas, had met Daniel the year before in a beginner mountaineering course. Athletic and determined, she was a dedicated runner and swimmer with excellent physical conditioning. Her family remembered her as adventurous, but always cautious and thoughtful in her decisions. Michael, the oldest of the group, worked as an IT technician and was Emily's cousin. He was the one who suggested climbing Mount Rainier to celebrate his recent job promotion. Known for his humor and easygoing personality, he was the kind of person who kept everyone's spirits high, even on the toughest trails. Sarah, the only one who lived near the mountain, was an elementary school teacher in Tacoma. She knew the area well and had helped organize the trip's logistics. Colleagues remembered her as organized, reliable, and deeply connected to the natural beauty of her home state. The 4 had gradually met through hiking groups and mutual friends, going on 2 smaller trips together before deciding to tackle Mount Rainier. Their plan was ambitious, but not reckless. Hike to Camp Muir, set up a base camp, and attempt the summit over the following days. On Friday, March 15, 1996, they arrived in Ashford in Daniel's blue Ford Explorer after driving for hours from their respective homes. According to hotel records at the Rainier Lodge, they checked in around 4:30 p.m. Witnesses saw them that evening at the lodge restaurant, studying topographic maps and discussing their route. One waiter, Jason Miller, would later recall, they looked well prepared, excited even. They had everything: maps, compasses, a portable radio. They seemed like experienced climbers. The next morning, Saturday, March 16th, dawned clear and cold. Weather reports from the Ashford Ranger Station recorded temperatures at 46 degrees with light northeast winds and excellent visibility. Perfect climbing weather. At 6:45 a.m., the 4 friends ate breakfast at the lodge. By 7:20 a.m., the receptionist saw them loading up their gear, large hiking packs, camping equipment, and enough supplies for several days before driving toward the Paradise trailhead. At 8:15 a.m., they parked at the designated lot near the start of the trail leading to Camp Muir. According to the registration log maintained by park rangers, they signed in at 8:30 a.m., clearly writing their names, contact information, and expected return. Date: Tuesday, March 19th. The on-duty ranger, Mark Henderson, would later recall, "They told me they planned to camp at Camp Muir and maybe try for the summit if conditions allowed. They had good gear and seemed to know what they were doing. Nothing raised any red flags." At 9:01 a.m., they officially began their ascent. The trail from Paradise to Camp Muir is a well-marked route, about a 3-hour climb for those in good shape, with an elevation gain of roughly 4,600 feet. That morning, other hikers descending from Camp Muir reported seeing the group around 10:30 a.m. near Panorama Point. They were moving at a steady pace, in good spirits, clearly enjoying the climb. It was the last confirmed sighting of them alive. Saturday and Sunday passed with no reported incidents. The weather remained stable, and other climbers in the area reported no sign of the four at Camp Muir or anywhere along the trails. By Tuesday, March 19th, when the group was supposed to return, families began to worry. Daniel had promised to call his parents in Phoenix as soon as they came down. Emily had planned to meet her sister in Austin on Wednesday. Michael was due back at work the same day, and Sarah was expected at her school Monday morning. When none of them showed up or contacted anyone, the calls began. Daniel's family first reached out to the Ashford Sheriff's Department, reporting that their son hadn't returned from his planned climb. On Thursday, March 21st, the Sheriff's Department launched a preliminary search. Deputies found Daniel's Ford Explorer exactly where the group had left it, locked and undisturbed. Inside were extra maps, a spare camera, and a bag of clean clothes, items climbers typically left behind for multi-day trips. Nothing suggested a hurried departure or trouble. On Friday, March 22nd, the first formal search began. It included deputies, park rangers, and several experienced local guides. They followed the standard route toward Camp Muir, carefully scanning the trail for any sign of the missing climbers. At Camp Muir, they found no trace of them, no tents, no equipment, no footprints. Other hikers confirmed they had seen no sign of a 4-person camp anywhere in the area. That was the first chilling question. If they reached Camp Muir as planned, why was there no evidence they had ever been there? The search expanded to alternate routes around the mountain, toward the summit, the adjacent ridges, even the deep crevasses below the glaciers. Searchers used whistles, megaphones, and called out the missing climbers' names, hoping for any response. The echoes of their names bounced off the cliffs, but there was no response. Over the following days, the search intensified. Volunteers poured in from mountaineering clubs in Seattle, Portland, and Spokane. The Washington Alpine Rescue Group, a specialized mountain rescue organization, dispatched a 6-person team equipped with advanced communication gear and trained search and rescue dogs. The dogs traced the group's scent along the main trail, about halfway to Camp Muir, but the trail vanished abruptly in a rocky area near a small creek. Handlers tried restarting the track from multiple points, but the scent ended the same way each time. Suddenly, with no clear direction, the climbers might have taken. By the first week of April, the Washington State Patrol and the King County Sheriff's Department formally joined the investigation. A joint command center was established in Ashford to coordinate efforts across the overlapping jurisdictions around Mount Rainier. Everyone working in the area, park rangers, guides, lodge owners, even local vendors, was questioned extensively. All confirmed seeing the 4 hikers on Saturday morning, but none remembered seeing them after 10:30 a.m. near Panorama Point. Investigators reviewed weather records from the National Weather Service. No sudden storms, no rapid temperature drops. Nothing unusual appeared in the data that could explain a catastrophic accident. Conditions had remained stable, winds moderate, visibility clear throughout the critical days. As the weeks dragged on without any evidence, theories began to emerge. The first was an accident, perhaps a hidden crevasse or a fall into a steep ravine. Mount Rainier's volcanic terrain is riddled with rock formations, caves, and deep gullies, invisible from the main trails. Specialized search teams rappelled into canyons and explored known caves. Nothing. No signs of a fall, no abandoned gear, no human remains. A second theory suggested the hikers might have taken an unreported alternate route, perhaps an ambitious push for the summit via the north face instead of the standard route through Camp Muir. Search teams spent 3 more weeks scouring lesser-used climbing paths, some requiring technical climbing gear. Again, nothing turned up. Then came a more unsettling possibility: foul play. In 1996, the Mount Rainier area was considered relatively safe, but not immune to crime. Detectives investigated potential robbery, abduction, or encounters with armed groups. They checked the backgrounds of everyone working in the area, questioned known offenders in nearby towns, and reviewed all reports of suspicious activity in the weeks surrounding the disappearance. No evidence surfaced linking the case to any criminal activity. Several reported sightings proved to be false leads. A family of tourists claimed they saw 4 hikers with large backpacks near Packwood, but it turned out to be an entirely different group. A store owner in Enumclaw said he sold supplies to hikers matching their description, but the dates didn't align, and he later admitted he was mistaken. Each false lead brought a brief surge of hope to the families, only to crush it again, draining investigative resources and emotional strength alike. The disappearance profoundly changed the lives of everyone connected to the 4 hikers. In Phoenix, Daniel Carter's parents, Richard and Linda Carter, became tireless advocates, organizing independent searches and pressuring authorities to keep the case alive. Richard, a textile factory supervisor, used his vacation time every year for 5 consecutive years to travel to Mount Rainier, hiring local guides with his own savings and even offering rewards for information. Linda fell into a deep depression that required years of therapy. She kept Daniel's room exactly as he had left it and lit a candle every Saturday, the day he had begun his final climb. In Austin, Emily Turner's family struggled in their own way. Her younger sister, Megan, withdrew from college temporarily to support their parents. Emily's mother clung desperately to the hope her daughter was alive, refusing to acknowledge the possibility of death. Her father, a retired engineer, obsessed over topographic maps, convinced he might discover a missed route. Night after night, he sketched alternate paths and calculated travel times, the work giving him a fragile sense of purpose. Michael Collins' disappearance left an immediate void at his workplace. His co-workers at the IT company raised funds to support his family's search efforts and kept his job open for 6 months, hoping against hope he might return. For Sarah Mitchell's small community in Tacoma, the impact was deeply personal. Her 5th-grade students asked every day when their favorite teacher would be back. The school principal organized prayer ceremonies and kept parents informed about the ongoing search efforts. Ashford itself felt the aftershocks. Some local businesses reported a drop in mountain tourism in the months following the disappearance. Professional guides began requiring detailed itineraries from clients and implemented stricter safety measures. On the first anniversary in 1997, all 4 families united for a coordinated private search, hiring a professional investigation firm specializing in missing persons. They spent family savings to fund a 2-week operation equipped with satellite communications and high-sensitivity metal detectors. Teams re-examined previously searched areas under the theory that critical evidence might have been overlooked. During the chaotic early days, they found scattered metal objects, a few rusted cans, fragments of old camping gear, remains of abandoned campfires. Each discovery raised momentary hope. None were linked to the missing hikers. In 1998, a self-proclaimed psychic approached the families, claiming to have visions about the hikers' location. Desperate, they followed his directions to a remote section of the park. Nothing was found. The incident created tension among the families. Daniel and Emily's parents saw it as wasted time, while Michael and Sarah's relatives argued that no possibility should be dismissed outright. In 1999, 3 years after the disappearance, an experienced climber reported finding remnants of a campfire and scraps of fabric in a remote canyon. Forensic analysis showed the fabric was synthetic, consistent with 1990s-era outdoor clothing, but there was no way to confirm ownership. The charcoal remnants dated roughly to the right time period, but again, nothing conclusively tied the site to the 4 missing hikers. As years passed, public attention faded, but for the families, the pain never lessened. In 2001, 5 years after the disappearance, a small memorial plaque was installed at the Paradise parking area. Paid for by the families and local climbing groups, it bore the names Daniel Carter, Emily Turner, Michael Collins, and Sarah Mitchell, along with the simple words, "In memory of the climbers who set out on March 16, 1996, and never returned. May they rest in eternal adventure." The mountaineering community adopted the tragedy as a solemn reminder of the risks inherent in their pursuit. Annual remembrance ceremonies were held, and stricter safety protocols were implemented, many inspired by this very case. Throughout the 2000s, new reports and theories surfaced from time to time. In 2003, a local guide reported finding the remains of a heavily weathered backpack, but analysis showed it was far too old to belong to the missing hikers. In 2006, a geologist studying volcanic formations suggested the hikers might have fallen into a crevasse that later sealed shut due to seismic activity. But there was no way to verify this theory. Daniel Carter's parents, aging and with declining health, continued visiting Mount Rainier every year until 2008. They were no longer able to join physical searches, but they stayed in touch with other families of the missing and with mountaineering groups determined to keep the memory of the case alive. In 2009, on the 13th anniversary of the disappearance, local authorities organized a special ceremony. Representatives from the National Park Service, Pierce County officials, surviving family members, and the mountaineering community gathered near the Paradise Trailhead, where the hikers had signed the registry for the last time. A small memorial garden was planted there in their honor. Meanwhile, Mount Rainier itself was changing. Since the mid-1990s, volcanic activity in the region had gradually intensified after decades of relative calm. Minor eruptions, shifting glaciers, and increased seismic movement altered sections of the landscape. Established trails became buried under new layers of ash and debris, and some traditional climbing routes were permanently closed for safety. Geologists speculated that any evidence visible in 1996 could now be buried beneath years of accumulated volcanic deposits. In 2012, heightened seismic activity led authorities to temporarily restrict access to certain sections of the mountain. During this period, helicopters conducted regular overflights to monitor geological changes, and pilots were instructed to report any signs of historic campsites or possible human remains. The flights revealed how drastically the landscape had shifted. Areas once thoroughly searched during the original investigation now looked entirely different under layers of volcanic ash and rockfall. Then came March 8, 2014. After an unusually harsh winter followed by rapidly rising spring temperatures, melting snow carved deep new channels across the mountainside. Climate change was now intensifying seasonal thaws, eroding terrain that had remained frozen for decades. Jack Morales, a 45-year-old mountain guide who had worked in the region for over 2 decades, set out early that morning from Ashford to survey a rarely used route on the mountain's northwest face. Known locally as the Old Hunters Trail, it had once been used by trappers and backcountry rangers before official climbing routes were established. Jack had assisted in the original 1996 searches. He knew the terrain intimately. The heavy snowmelt that year convinced him to check whether long-hidden sections of the trail had reopened, or exposed anything long buried. Around 11:30 a.m., while following a newly formed stream cutting across the slope, Jack noticed something strange. Meltwater had eroded a small ravine that hadn't existed on any of his previous trips. Approaching carefully, he froze. Half buried in the wet earth, the corner of a backpack protruded from the sediment. The fabric was faded and weather-beaten, but unmistakably modern, late 20th century, not some century-old relic. Jack had found countless discarded items over the years. Most turned out to be abandoned camping gear with no connection to any mystery. But something about this pack, its depth in the soil, its location far off established routes, felt different. He photographed it from multiple angles before disturbing, anything, logged the exact GPS coordinates on his handheld device, and only then began carefully digging with the small trail shovel he always carried. The pack lay deeper than he first expected. As he worked it free, he saw its original dark green color emerging beneath the dirt. Despite years exposed to harsh conditions, the structure remained surprisingly intact. Zippers were corroded, but still functional. Straps frayed but whole. On the front panel, faint beneath layers of grime, Jack spotted a handwritten ID tag. Hands shaking, he cleaned the tag until the name appeared clearly. Daniel Carter. Phoenix. AZ. Jack felt his chest tighten. He had helped search for Daniel and the others nearly 2 decades earlier. He remembered every name. He photographed the tag close up, then used his cell phone to call the Ashford Sheriff's Department. Reception was weak, but he got through. "Think I found evidence from the 1996 case," Jack told the dispatcher. At first, the deputy sounded skeptical. Too many supposed finds over the years had turned out meaningless. But when Jack relayed the exact coordinates and the name from the tag, the deputy's tone changed immediately. "Stay right where you are," the deputy ordered. "Do not touch anything else. We're sending a team right now." Jack waited over 2 hours beside the backpack, keeping curious hikers away from the site. At 2:15 p.m., the first response team arrived, 2 deputies from the sheriff's department, and a state investigator from the Washington Attorney General's office. They immediately secured the perimeter and requested forensic specialists. Among those called was Dr. William Harris, a forensic anthropologist from the University of Washington, who had worked on numerous cold cases involving remote wilderness recoveries. By early evening, Harris and his team arrived with excavation equipment, cameras, and evidence containers. They documented the site meticulously, photographing and measuring everything before removal. Inside the pack, they found a partially damaged camera, a personal journal wrapped in plastic, topographic maps, and small personal items later identified by the families. The journal, waterlogged but still partially legible, contained entries dated March 1996. The final readable note, dated March 16th, read, "Perfect day for the climb. Everyone's excited. Emily found an alternate route on the map. Might be more interesting than the standard trail." It was the first solid clue suggesting the hikers may have deliberately taken a different path, one investigators never considered back in 1996. Over the next 2 days, under strict forensic supervision, the team expanded the search grid around the site. 5 feet from Daniel's pack, they uncovered a second backpack, later confirmed to belong to Sarah Mitchell through an embroidered ID tag. Inside were clothing, first aid supplies, and a badly damaged portable radio. 2 backpacks. Same location. After 18 years, the mountain was finally giving up pieces of its secret, but the question deepened. Why were their belongings buried far from any known route? Dr. Harris's team began a geological survey of the surrounding area, searching for clues in the altered landscape itself. Geologists quickly determined that the area had experienced a significant landslide at some point in the past. Distinct layers of sediment and the presence of massive boulders foreign to the surrounding terrain made it clear that the ground here had violently shifted. Stratigraphic analysis indicated the slide had likely occurred between 15 and 20 years earlier, matching almost exactly the time frame of the hikers' disappearance. The emerging theory began to take shape. The 4 hikers had indeed followed an alternate route, just as Daniel's journal hinted. That detour had led them into a geologically unstable zone where a sudden landslide buried both them and their belongings. To confirm this, geologists from the University of Washington were brought in with ground-penetrating radar. They scanned a 100-square-meter grid surrounding the discovery site. The results were astonishing. Beneath 2 to 4 meters of earth, the radar detected irregular shapes, objects that clearly didn't belong to the natural environment. Their size and density were consistent with camping gear, personal effects, and possibly human remains. As excavations advanced, authorities faced the difficult task of contacting the families. It had been 18 long years. Lives had changed. Parents had aged, siblings had grown up, entire generations had shifted since March 1996. On March 10, 2014, Daniel Carter's parents, Richard and Linda, now in their 70s, received the call at their Phoenix home. Richard, who had clung to hope for nearly 2 decades, put the phone down slowly before turning to his wife. "I always knew we'd find out someday," he said softly. "I just didn't expect it to hurt this much." In Austin, Emily Turner's family reacted with the same blend of relief and heartbreak. Her sister Megan, now married with children, immediately made arrangements to travel to Washington. Their mother, who had spent years drifting between hope and resignation, felt for the first time that real mourning could finally begin. For Michael Collins's family, the news was bittersweet. His parents had both passed away, his mother in 2008, his father in 2011, never knowing what had happened to their son. Michael's siblings, now with families of their own, felt gratitude that answers had finally come, mixed with sorrow that their parents weren't alive to hear them. Sarah Mitchell had been an only child. Both her parents had also died in recent years. It was her cousins who received the official call, gathering the remaining family members to decide how to proceed once the excavation was complete. On March 12th, the digging reached its most significant point yet. At roughly 10 feet below the surface, the forensic team uncovered partial human remains alongside camping gear unmistakably dating back to the 1990s. The bones were preserved well enough for analysis despite nearly 2 decades of pressure, erosion, and shifting earth. Dr. William Harris, the forensic anthropologist, confirmed the remains matched young adults, and the positioning suggested they had been buried suddenly, not intentionally. Around them lay scattered clues: a crushed lantern with its batteries corroded, fragments of a collapsed tent, a broken portable camping stove. The distribution of items told a story of chaos, of a camp violently consumed by nature in seconds. One of the most haunting finds was a camera in far better condition than the first. Stored inside a weatherproof case, it offered real hope that the film inside might still hold images, and it did. Forensic imaging specialists from the Smithsonian Institution were called in to attempt recovery. The film had endured 18 years of moisture, freeze-thaw cycles, and chemical decay. The emulsion was badly damaged, yet using advanced recovery methods, technicians managed to salvage 14 partial images from what had once been a 36 exposure roll. The pictures told the hikers' final story. The earliest shots showed them leaving Ashford, backpacks loaded, faces bright with anticipation. Others documented the climb itself, trails winding through snowfields, breathtaking views across the Cascade Range, moments of rest where they shared food and laughter. The final images were the hardest to look at. They showed the camp on the very plateau where the excavation now took place. One picture captured Daniel and Michael working together to pitch the tent. Another showed Sarah preparing a meal on the portable stove. The most chilling image was of Emily Turner pointing toward a jagged rock formation while holding a map. She was smiling. Behind her, barely visible in the frame, loomed the fractured cliff that would later collapse onto their campsite. The last recoverable photo, time-stamped the evening of March 16th, showed all 4 gathered around a small campfire. Sunset bathed the mountains in orange light as they laughed together, completely unaware of the danger above them. Evidence now painted a clear timeline. They had reached the plateau around 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, March 16th. They set up camp beneath the cliff, likely unaware of its instability. Sometime in the early hours of Sunday, March 17th, around 2:47 a.m., according to a stopped wristwatch recovered from the site, a minor seismic event shook the region. Historical earthquake records confirmed small tremors that night, likely just enough to dislodge the fractured rock face above the camp. The mountain had buried them in seconds. The seismic tremor, recorded as a 3.2 magnitude by Mount Rainier's monitoring stations, had been classified as minor, too small to trigger any warnings, yet it had been powerful enough to bring down the unstable cliff directly above the campsite. Forensic analysis confirmed the landslide had been sudden and massive. Roughly 200 tons of volcanic rock, soil, and debris collapsed in seconds. The position of the remains indicated the 4 hikers had been asleep in their tents when it happened. There had been no time to escape, no chance to use the portable radio for help. The slide had buried the entire campsite under meters of rock and ash, erasing every trace from the surface. This explained everything: the failed searches, the lack of clues, why for nearly 2 decades no one had found anything. The area had never been part of the standard search routes because it wasn't on any official map as a camping site. And after the landslide, the ground above appeared natural, showing no sign of the human lives trapped beneath. For the families, the discovery brought a complicated mix of relief and heartbreak. After 18 years of uncertainty, they finally had answers. But confirmation brought grief anew. Richard and Linda Carter traveled from Phoenix to be present during the final excavations. Richard, frail but determined, stood at the site for hours, watching the forensic team's work. "At least we know they didn't suffer," he told his wife one evening, gazing at the mountain from their hotel. "They were doing what they loved, and it was fast. That gives me some peace." Linda found comfort in the recovered photographs. "Seeing his smile in those last pictures," she said softly, holding the images, "reminds me how happy Daniel was. He died doing what he loved." Emily Turner's family held a private ceremony at the site. Her sister Megan, now 42 with children of her own, read a letter she had written years earlier but never delivered. Megan's kids, who had never met their aunt, laid wildflowers where Emily's belongings had been found. "Emily always wanted to be a doctor to help people," Megan said through tears. "She didn't get that chance, but maybe her story will save lives in the mountains. In that way, she's still helping others." Michael Collins, younger. Brothers who had traveled to Washington together shared the same bittersweet relief. "Our parents died never knowing what happened to Michael," his brother David said quietly. "It hurts they didn't live to see this, but at least now we can finally honor him properly." Sarah Mitchell's cousins, along with her former colleagues from the Tacoma Elementary School where she taught, organized a memorial event where they read from Sarah's recovered journal entries about local wildlife. Her love for teaching and nature lived on through her own words. Once forensic analysis was complete, the remains were returned to the families for burial. Each family chose different ways to honor the hikers' lives. Richard and Linda Carter established a university scholarship for engineering students researching mountain safety. Emily's family funded improved warning signs and emergency communication stations throughout Mount Rainier National Park and created a scholarship for rural medical students. Michael's brothers launched a foundation to support families of missing hikers, offering search resources and psychological counseling. Sarah's relatives partnered with Washington's Department of Education to introduce outdoor safety programs for teachers and students, including supervised field trips and natural hazard training. The case permanently changed climbing safety across the Pacific Northwest. The landslide area was officially designated a high-risk geological zone with multilingual warning signs posted at all trailheads. The National Park Service introduced stricter registration requirements for hikers, including mandatory route declarations and GPS tracking devices for anyone leaving established trails. Dr. William Harris, the forensic anthropologist who led the recovery, published a detailed case study in the Journal of Wilderness and Environmental Medicine, emphasizing the importance of geological risk assessments in mountain disappearance investigations. His report became a reference point worldwide for similar cases. Jack Morales, the veteran guide who first found Daniel's backpack, continued working on the mountain but became one of the loudest voices advocating for geological hazard education. He organized training seminars for local guides on identifying unstable terrain and emergency response procedures. "Finding that backpack changed me," Jack reflected years later. "It taught me the mountains always hold secrets, and as guides it's our job to protect the people who trust us out here." The original memorial plaque near Paradise was replaced with a larger monument listing not only the names of Daniel Carter, Emily Turner, Michael Collins, and Sarah Mitchell, but also detailed safety information and resources for hikers. Rescue technology advanced too. Additional radio towers were installed across the park, and new search protocols were developed specifically for geologically unstable areas. Every March, on the anniversary of the disappearance, local hikers organize a commemorative trek along the safe route to Camp Muir, honoring the 4 hikers and teaching newcomers essential mountain safety techniques. Mount Rainier National Park also launched a research initiative with the University of Washington to study the interaction between human recreation and geological hazards, directly inspired by this case. The tragedy served as a lasting reminder. Behind every statistic are real people with families, dreams, and stories. And while the mountain kept its secret for 18 years, it also forced change, better safety practices, stronger rescue systems, and a legacy ensuring others might be spared the same fate. Spring 2014 marked the beginning of the final chapter in one of Mount Rainier's longest and most haunting mysteries. With the hikers' remains identified and their belongings carefully cataloged, the investigation formally shifted from recovery to closure. The Pierce County Sheriff's Office, the Washington State Attorney General's Office, and the National Park Service jointly issued the official report in May 2014, detailing the entire chain of events, from the group's decision to take the alternate route, to the landslide triggered by the minor earthquake, to the 18 years the mountain had guarded its secret. For the families reading the report was both devastating and strangely comforting. The meticulous reconstruction of events gave them the answers they had begged for since 1996. In Phoenix, Richard and Linda Carter held a quiet burial service for their son Daniel. They chose a hillside cemetery with views of the mountains Daniel had loved so much. Friends from his university days spoke about his meticulous planning, his passion for photography, and how his journals had inspired changes in climbing safety for future generations. In Austin, Emily Turner's memorial took place on the University of Texas campus. Medical students and faculty gathered as the dean announced the creation of the Emily Turner Rural Medicine Scholarship Fund, honoring the dreams she had never realized but which would now help others bring healthcare to remote communities. Michael Collins' younger brothers organized his service in Dallas, where co-workers from his IT firm joined family members to dedicate the Michael Collins Foundation for Missing Hikers, a nonprofit committed to aiding search and rescue operations nationwide. Sarah Mitchell's former students, now adults, attended her memorial in Tacoma. Many spoke of how she had sparked their love for science and the outdoors. The Washington Department of Education officially launched the Sarah Mitchell Outdoor Safety Program for schools that same day, ensuring her legacy would live on in classrooms across the state. By late 2014, the National Park Service had implemented sweeping safety reforms across Mount Rainier National Park. New signage warned of geological hazards in multiple languages. GPS locator requirements became standard for all climbers venturing off main trails. Park rangers received advanced training in seismic risk assessment, and helicopter landing zones were established near historically unstable areas to speed up rescue operations if needed. The following spring, a new memorial was unveiled at the Paradise Trailhead. The bronze monument bore the hikers' names: Daniel Carter, Emily Turner, Michael Collins, and Sarah Mitchell, alongside photographs recovered from the camera that had survived underground for nearly 2 decades. One image showed the group laughing around their final campfire, forever frozen in that moment before disaster struck. Dozens of climbers, local residents, search and rescue veterans, and family members gathered for the ceremony. Richard Carter, standing beside his wife, spoke softly but firmly. "Mountains demand respect," he said. "Our children didn't die in vain. Their story will keep others safe." After the speeches, 4 hikers carried symbolic climbing ropes up the safer, marked route to Camp Muir, placing flowers along the way in memory of the lost. Over the next few years, the case became a standard teaching example in forensic anthropology, wilderness safety courses, and search and rescue training programs nationwide. The combination of geology, weather, human decision-making, and delayed discovery offered lessons that shaped policy for decades. Jack Morales, the veteran guide who had found Daniel's backpack, never stopped leading climbs on Mount Rainier. But he began every expedition the same way, by telling the story of the 1996 tragedy. Not to scare people, he explained in interviews, but to remind them that nature writes the rules out here. We just follow them. By 2020, satellite communication beacons, real-time seismic sensors, and drone-assisted search technology had become standard tools across national parks in the United States. Many of those advancements traced directly back to the tragedy on Mount Rainier. Even now, each March, local hikers organize the Carter Turner Collins Mitchell Memorial Ascent, a guided trek along the safer trails. It ends at the memorial plaque, where newcomers learn the story and veterans share memories, keeping alive the legacy of the four who never returned. The mountain still stands silent and beautiful, its glaciers gleaming under the sun, as if nothing had ever happened. But beneath its slopes lies a story nearly lost to time, a story of adventure, tragedy, loss, and ultimately, hard-won answers. A story reminding everyone who sets foot on Mount Rainier that preparation, respect, and vigilance are the price of walking among giants, and that sometimes the earth itself holds the final word.